So I've got grades for 10 of the more interesting signings from day one of NFL free agency. So let's get right into it, starting with Javon Hargrave signing with the 49ers for 4 years, $84 million. The Niners made a huge splash getting the defensive tackle from the Eagles, but was it a good idea considering their salary cap situation? Price agnostic though, Javon Hargrave is an amazing fit, and it will complement Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa, especially with the latter, where you can see him really feasting on those double teams that Bosa faces. So in a vacuum, it was a good move. And in regards to the salary cap, really, that thing is an ink blot test at this point. Teams see what they want to see in it. That money might have been better spent on acquiring some offensive linemen. You could argue that part of the reason their QBs keep getting hurt is because they're exposed to a lot of hits, because outside of Trent Williams, there's not a lot of talent there. And yeah, re-signing Mclinchey probably wouldn't have been the best idea, but there's other guys out there who could have done a good job, so maybe they will on day 2, we'll see. Also, they just signed Sam Darnold, so the lack of O-line depth might just be a feature, not a bug. The QBs are just cannon fodder holding the line for Shanahan's scheme and that great D-line to do their job. Considering all that, I'll give the signing an A-. Next up, we have a signing from a division rival of the Niners, the Seahawks, who gave Dre'mont Jones a 3-year, $51 million deal. At the end of the season, Pete Carroll felt like he needed dogs to compete with the Niners. But is Dre'mont Jones enough? For one, the kind of defense that Seattle plays, they definitely need an interior pass rush. They don't like to blitz much, so Dre'mont Jones will definitely be a nice fit. He unfortunately won't address the issues that they have with run defense, but if they surround him with the right pieces that mitigate his weaknesses, his presence could have a cascading effect on a defense that already has a very intriguing and young defensive backcourt. The best part is that he didn't really break the bank for this move, and they still have room to operate and fill out the rest of the roster, and hopefully add more guys that could help them compete with the Niners. So all in all, I gotta give it an A. Next up, we have the most controversial signing from day 1, Tremaine Edmunds, with the Chicago Bears signed to a 4-year, $72 million deal. I gotta say I'm surprised by how unenthused everyone is by this signing. Sure, it feels a little musical chairsy because they could have just kept Roquan Smith. But then again, Edmunds only costs money and they got a pick back for Smith, so it is a net positive as long as the 24-year-old linebacker finally fulfills his potential. He did have a solid year for the Bills last year, especially in pass coverage, but he's yet to have the kind of season that warrants a deal like this. But again, he's 24, so it's not exactly magical thinking to think he could still reach his potential. Overall, I give the signing a B. Next up, we've got another off-ball linebacker, except a far older one, the 31-year-old Eric Kendricks, who signed with the Chargers for $13 million over 2 years. On the surface, it makes sense. The Chargers need a linebacker, and they didn't exactly break the bank for him. But is Kendricks the right guy? His resume is pretty stellar. He is a former All-Pro, for one. But his performance, according to PFF, has slipped some in the last 2 years. Some of that could be excused by schematic issues. And even if they are a valid excuse, he is 31, so his production could fall off a cliff at any moment, regardless. However, he might be worth the risk considering he's still good against the run, and that's a problem the Chargers haven't seemed to be able to fix the last 2 years. Obviously, it would have been nice to potentially keep Drew Tranquil around, but considering the Chargers' salary cap situation, it made sense they would go with more of a stopgap type thing. But if I had my druthers, I'd rather go after a veteran like Bobby Wagner, who's still performing at a high level. That's why I gotta give this a C+. Next up, we have a free agency signing / hoodwinking with the Miami Dolphins signing linebacker David Long to a 2-year, $11 million deal. I'm not going to say a lot about this one because it would mostly be just a lot of expletives, but yeah, Miami definitely pulled one over on the NFL. Regardless, Vic Fangio will know what to do with them, and their defense is definitely looking much improved, especially with the addition of Jalen Ramsey as well. So far, the Dolphins are the early frontrunners for the winners of free agency, which usually means they probably won't do very well next season. Regardless, this is an S-tier kind of signing, and that's why I have to give it an A+. Next up, we have the Raiders, who signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a 3-year, $67 million deal. I have to say, I like the signing a lot. Sure, they replaced Carr with a player with a similar skill level and a long injury list, but I still think there's untapped potential with Jimmy. I don't think he was ever well suited for that Shanahan offense, and will look better in a timing-based one, especially one that he's familiar with, and he can really utilize that quick release. It might be hard to remember, but there was a time when Jimmy G was really highly regarded and thought of as a prospect, and he happens to be working again with a coach that helped him become that prospect. That said, he doesn't solve all of Vegas' problems. For as good as he looked in that offense back in the day, the NFL has made a massive shift towards more athletic quarterbacks, and that's not Jimmy GQ's game. So in sum, I think there's a ceiling to this move, but I also don't think that ceiling is that low. However, it might be subject to change, especially if they decide to dump Davante Adams. Until then, it's a B+. Next up, we have one of the Conor McGoverns, with the Buffalo Bills signed to a 3-year, $23 million deal. It's a nice little move for the Buffalo Bills, who definitely need offensive line help, and they didn't even break the bank either. But then again, they also didn't get that good of a player. McGovern was pretty productive as part of a line alongside Zach Martin, but how good is he going to be for the Buffalo Bills, whose offensive line issues might have to do with play style, especially since they have Aaron Kromer, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the game right now. The real remedy would be to pick up some elite talent, the kind that can handle Josh Allen and his time in the pocket. Unfortunately, it's not really available in free agency. They would have to just overpay for guys who would just struggle probably similarly. So considering they didn't spend a lot of money on him and it didn't hinder their ability to sign Edmunds, I definitely think it's a solid signing and I'll have to give it a B. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons, who signed free safety Jessie Bates to a 4-year, $65 million deal. Bates is an excellent safety, and he's usually the kind of player the Bengals keep around. However, with Burrow about to get a truckload, and the Bengals even considering naming rights to fund it, there just wasn't room for him. For the Falcons, it's a solid signing. They get him for cheap, well, at least relatively, and he's someone familiar with Ryan Nielsen, their defensive coordinator. It also helps that they add to a secondary that has A.J. Terrell already. Though for as solid as the move is, it doesn't really move the needle that much for a team that isn't quite there yet. But that's not Bates' fault, he's a good player, and getting a good player will always help. They just need more of them now. So I gotta give it a B+. Next up is Juwan Taylor, who the Chiefs signed to a 4-year, $80 million deal. The signing of the left tackle is a curious one, and I definitely vacillated between giving this one a high and a low grade. Why? Well, it's complicated. In terms of what's to like, he's still only 25 and has a lot of room to grow, and just had his best season, so he might be on the verge of his best years with the Chiefs. It doesn't hurt that he landed with Andy Reid, so any ceiling he has, the odds are pretty good that he'll reach it. But in terms of what's not to like, they also paid a lot for a guy who is not a finished product, and might potentially never be finished. Also, how much money are they going to save by not signing Orlando Brown? And I haven't even mentioned that Juwan Taylor was playing at right tackle last year. Is he ready to just switch over to the left side? So there's risk here. But since this is the Chiefs, I don't know if they're done yet. There's those sort of whispers going around that Laramie Tunsil might be involved. So I'll give this a B-, but only for now and up until a Tunsil move is made, if it happens. Alright, and now we have Mclinchey, who signed a 5-year, $87.5 million deal with the Broncos. Did the Broncos overpay for the right tackle? It depends. It sure seems like the kind of move that they did to make sure that Russell Wilson's cooking isn't being relied on. In other words, they picked up a right tackle to shore up their run game. Is it a good idea to be throwing that much money to work around Russell Wilson's weaknesses? At least on one side of the ball? Because it definitely looks like they made a choice between Dre'mont Jones and McGlinchey, so they might just be robbing Peter to pay Paul. So even if the offense looks better with Russell Wilson doing as he's told, wearing his wristband like a good boy, will it really matter if their defense is worse? And there's a good chance it will be, especially since Ejiro Evero left for the Panthers, and summarily replaced with Vance Joseph. And sure, the upcoming NFL draft does have some promising D-line prospects, but they don't exactly have the draft capital to do that. So the money they took up signing McGlinchey definitely came at the expense of the defense. So considering all that, I gotta give this move a C-. So what did you think of day one of NFL free agency? What was your favorite move, or least favorite move? Did your team screw up? Let me know in the comments. Also, definitely leave a like and a subscribe if you can. It really helps a lot considering YouTube recently has kind of cut down on promoting me, but I honestly appreciate that anyone's even watching these videos, so thanks again.